I made the decision to visit my husband's mistress in the hospital, but when I pushed open that door to room 427, I wasn't prepared to see my own face staring back at me from that hospital bed. The leather folder in my hands filled with all my evidence, all my accusations fell to the floor, and with it every certainty I'd held about my life. Before I go any further, I need to pause for just a moment. If you're here with me right now, do me a favor, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I need to know this story reaches as far as it needs to, because what I'm about to tell you could save someone's life. It might even save your own. The hospital corridors smelled like disinfectant and broken promises that Wednesday afternoon. My heels clicked against the linoleum with each step, echoing off the pale green walls like a countdown to my own reckoning. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, casting shadows that danced and disappeared. I clutched my purse in one hand and that damning leather folder in the other, the one containing 3 years of credit card statements I'd found hidden in Marcus's golf bag last Saturday morning. I'd been looking for his spare set of car keys. What I found instead were receipts. Hundreds of them. Dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together. Hotel stays in cities he'd claimed were solo business trips. Flowers charged to our joint credit card that I'd never received. And one name, appearing over and over again on the itemized statements. Elena Harrington. 26 years of marriage. 26 years of cooking Sunday dinners and ironing his shirts and believing every "I love you" that came out of his mouth. 26 years, and I'd been so blind. We'd been happy once, at least I thought we had been, Marcus with his easy smile and ambitious dreams, me with my accounting degree and plans for the future we'd build together. We'd talked about children, about growing old, on a porch somewhere, about being one of those couples who still held hands in their 70s. But somewhere along the way, between his promotions and my late nights at the office, between the miscarriages we didn't talk about and the distance we pretended not to notice, we'd become strangers sharing a bed. I just didn't realize he'd found someone else to fill the space I'd left empty. Room 427. I'd memorized that number like a death sentence. It had taken me 4 days to track her down. 4 days since Marcus rushed out at midnight last Saturday claiming an emergency at work. I'd watched him through our bedroom window, sitting in his car in the driveway for 10 minutes before pulling away, his phone pressed to his ear. The look on his face wasn't panic. It was fear. And something else. Something that looked almost like love. I'd followed the paper trail. Called hospitals using a fake name. Claiming to be her sister looking for her after an accident. Elena Harrington. 35 years old. Marketing executive. Critical condition at Mercy General. After a single car collision on Morrison Hill Road. And Marcus, my Marcus, had been by her side for 72 straight hours, according to the nurse I'd sweet-talked into giving me information. My hand hovered over the door handle. Through the small rectangular window, I could see the edge of a hospital bed, white sheets pulled tight, a monitor beeping steadily. I had rehearsed this moment in my bathroom mirror that morning while Marcus was in the shower. I would walk in with my head high, my voice steady. I would lay out the evidence, every receipt, every late-night phone call, every lie. I would look her in the eyes and ask her if destroying my marriage had been worth it. I took a deep breath, drawing on every ounce of strength I'd built over 26 years. I could survive this. I'd survived worse. I'd survived my mother's death, my father's drinking, the loneliness of building a life with someone who'd stopped seeing me years ago. But nothing in 26 years could have prepared me for what waited on the other side of that door. I pushed it open. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the woman in the bed, and that's when time stopped. She had my nose. The exact slope, the slight bump on the bridge I'd always hated. My eyes, that unusual hazel green that shifted colors in different light, my bone structure, my lips, my chin. It was like looking into a mirror. No, it was like looking at a ghost. Then I saw it. Above her left eyebrow, partially hidden by a bandage, was a crescent moon-shaped scar. My hand flew to my own face, fingers finding the identical mark I'd carried since I was 7 years old. Since the day Elena and I had fallen from that oak tree in the backyard of our first foster home, before the system separated us, before they told me she'd died in a house fire 2 years later. Her eyes fluttered open. Those eyes, my eyes, focused on my face. And I watched as the same shock, the same impossible recognition, flooded through her. Her lips parted, trembling. When she spoke, her voice was a broken whisper that shattered what was left of my world. "Sarah?" The folder hit the floor. Papers scattered everywhere, credit card statements, receipts, all my evidence of betrayal spreading across the hospital linoleum. My vision blurred. The room tilted. My hand reached for the doorframe to steady myself, because my legs had forgotten how to work. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Elena Harrington wasn't my husband's mistress. Elena Harrington was Elena Morrison, my twin sister, my dead twin sister. And somehow, impossibly, she knew my name. "Sarah," she said again. And this time it wasn't a question. Tears were streaming down her face, running into the oxygen tube beneath her nose. "Oh my God, Sarah, is it really you?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there in the doorway of room 427, staring at the impossible woman in the hospital bed. My brain was scrambling, trying to make sense of what my eyes were showing me. Was I having a breakdown? Had the stress of discovering Marcus's affair finally snapped something vital in my mind? But no, this was real. She was real. The monitor next to her bed beeped steadily. The afternoon sunlight cast her shadow against the wall. And when she lifted her hand toward me, trembling and uncertain, I could see the IV line taped to her wrist, see the bruises blooming purple and yellow across her skin. "Elena?" The name came out as barely a whisper. You're supposed to be dead. They told me you were dead too," she sobbed. "The social worker, Mrs. Patterson, she said there was a fire at your foster home. She said you didn't make it out." I shook my head, my own tears blurring my vision. No, they told me you died in a fire. At the Hendersons' house. That's where they placed you after they separated us." "I was never at the Hendersons," Elena said, her voice breaking. "I was at the Robinsons, then the Clarks, then God, so many places, Sarah. So many different homes." My legs finally remembered how to move. I stumbled into the room, leaving the scattered papers behind me, and sank into the chair beside her bed. Up close, the resemblance was even more staggering. We weren't just similar. We were identical, the same widow's peak hairline, the same slightly crooked left incisor, the same freckle beneath our right ear. "The scar," I whispered, reaching up to touch my own eyebrow. "Do you remember?" Elena's hand rose to mirror mine, her fingers ghosting over the crescent moon mark above her eye. "The oak tree," she said, and a sound that was half laugh, half sob escaped her throat. "In Mrs. Morrison's backyard. We were trying to reach that bird's nest. You wanted to see if there were babies in it," I continued, the memory flooding back with crystal clarity. "We climbed so high, and then that branch cracked right under us," Elena finished. "We fell together, holding hands all the way down." I remembered hitting the ground, the world going white with pain. I remembered Elena's terrified face above mine, blood streaming from the cut above her eyebrow. I remembered her screaming for help, refusing to leave my side even though her own head was bleeding. We'd been 7 years old. We'd been inseparable. We'd been sisters in every way that mattered, even though the state had never officially called us that. "They separated us the next month," I said, the old grief rising up fresh and raw. "Said Mrs. Morrison was too old to handle twins. Said it would be easier to place us individually." "I cried for weeks," Elena whispered. "I kept asking when I'd see you again. They kept saying soon, soon, soon. And then Mrs. Patterson came with that look on her face. And she sat me down. And she told me." Her voice broke completely. "She told me you were gone. That there had been an accident. That I needed to be brave." They told me the same thing. I was crying openly now, tears streaming down my face. 2 years after they took you away. I was 9 years old, and they told me I'd never see my sister again. "Why would they lie?" Elena asked, anguish written across every feature of her face, my face. "Why would they tell us we were dead?" I don't know. And I didn't. It made no sense. Unless it was just easier for the system. Easier than explaining why we'd never be reunited. Easier than dealing with two grieving children who kept asking for each other. Easier to kill us off in their paperwork than admit they'd permanently destroyed the only family we had left. 30 years. Elena breathed. Sarah, we lost 30 years. The weight of it hit me like a physical blow. 30 years. She'd lived an entire life I knew nothing about. I'd lived mine without her. We'd both been alone in the world, believing we had no one. When all along, we'd had each other. I reached for her hand, and she grabbed mine like a lifeline. Her grip was weak from her injuries, but desperate, real, warm and alive and impossible and here. I looked for you, I confessed, when I turned 18 and aged out of the system. I tried to find records, but everything was sealed. They said you were deceased. There was even a death certificate. I went to the cemetery they listed, and there was a grave marker, Elena. Your name on a stone. They did the same for you, she whispered. I visited your grave every year on your birthday. I'd bring flowers and talk to you about my life. About school and jobs and everything I wished I could share with you. We sat there, hands clasped, crying for the lost years, for the lie we'd been fed, for the childhood we'd been robbed of. The monitor beeped. The hospital sounds filtered in from the hallway. And slowly, gradually, the shock began to recede enough for reality to creep back in. I looked down at our joined hands, at her bandaged wrist, at the bruises covering her arms. The sister I'd thought was dead was here, alive, in a hospital bed after a car accident. And I'd come here to confront my husband's mistress. My husband. Marcus. The name hit me like ice water. I pulled back slightly, my mind racing, connecting dots I desperately didn't want to connect. Elena, I said slowly, my voice shaking. How do you know my name? How did you know it was me when I walked in? She blinked at me, confused. What do you mean? You're my sister. Of course I knew you. But you thought I was dead. You haven't seen me since we were 7. We're 30 years older. We've changed. My heart was pounding now, a sick feeling spreading through my chest. So how did you recognize me instantly? Elena's confusion deepened. Sarah, I've seen pictures of you. Recent pictures. I know what you look like now. The room went cold. What pictures? Where did you see pictures of me? Marcus showed me, Elena said, and the world tilted again. He has. Dozens of photos of you in his office. He talks about you all the time. About how much he loved you. About how devastated he was when he lost you. Lost me. When he lost me. Elena, I said, my voice barely audible. What exactly did Marcus tell you about me? Elena's face softened at my question. A sad, distant look crossing her features. He told me you died, she said quietly. His first wife, Sarah. He said you were in a car accident 10 years ago, that he'd lost you and never really recovered. The words didn't make sense. I shook my head, trying to clear it. What are you talking about? I'm not dead. I'm right here. We've been married for 26 years. No. Elena's voice was gentle, pitying, like she was talking to someone confused. Marcus and I have been together for 3 years. He was a widower when we met. He showed me your grave, Sarah. We visited it together on the anniversary of your death. He brought roses. He cried. My grave. He'd taken her to the same fabricated grave I'd visited for her. The sick symmetry of it made my stomach lurch. Elena, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I'm not dead. I'm married to Marcus. Right now. Currently. We renewed our vows last year. I pulled up my photos, turned the screen toward her. There was Marcus and me at our vow renewal ceremony, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling at the camera. Elena's eyes widened, her face going pale. That's not possible, she whispered. That's not when was this taken? Last April. 14 months ago. I swiped to the next photo. This is Christmas. This is our anniversary dinner in July. This is from 2 weeks ago at his company picnic. Elena stared at the screen, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. The monitor beside her bed started beeping faster. No, this doesn't make sense. We've been living together for 2 years. He comes home to me every night. She stopped, her face crumbling. Except Tuesdays and Thursdays. He said those were late nights at the office. Regional meetings. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I repeated numbly. That's when he comes home to me. The other nights, he tells me he's staying at the downtown apartment because of early morning meetings. We stared at each other, the horrible truth settling between us like poison. He proposed to me 6 months ago, Elena said, her voice breaking. She lifted her bandaged right hand, and there, catching the afternoon light, was a ring. An engagement ring with a princess-cut diamond in a platinum setting. My breath caught in my throat. I held up my own left hand. My ring was nearly identical, same cut, same setting, just with a slightly larger stone. He took me to Catalina Island, Elena continued, tears streaming down her face. Sunset on the beach. Got down on one knee and told me I'd made him believe in love again after losing you. We were planning the wedding for next spring. Spring. The same season he'd been talking about taking me on that second honeymoon to Europe he'd been promising for years. Different names, I said, my mind racing, piecing together the puzzle. What name does he use with you? Harrington. Marcus Harrington. That's his mother's maiden name. He said he started using it professionally after you died because Morrison reminded him too much of... She stopped, understanding dawning in her eyes. Of you. Your name. You're Sarah Morrison. And he told you that you're Elena Harrington. I felt sick. 2 separate identities. 2 separate lives. The business travel excuse. The late nights. The downtown apartment. God, how many apartments does he have? I live in the Riverside complex, Elena said. Unit 304. I'm in the Morrison Heights townhouse, the one we've had for 15 years. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe. He's been living a double life, with both of us. But that doesn't explain, Elena, why us. Why you and me specifically. Out of all the women in the world, how did he end up with twin sisters who didn't even know the other existed? Elena had gone very still. Sarah, what do you do for a living? I'm an accountant. Senior partner at Morrison and Associates. Why? I'm a marketing executive at Harrington and Klein. Her voice was hollow. Those are the names he gave us. Our professional identities. Our separate lives. He built us into different people. He kept us apart deliberately, I said slowly, the full horror of it sinking in. He knew. He had to have known. The resemblance alone, Elena, we're identical. There's no way he didn't realize we were twins. Then why? Elena's voice rose, anguished. Why would he do this? What kind of sick game is this? I looked at my sister, my mirror image broken and bandaged in a hospital bed, wearing an engagement ring from my husband. And suddenly the credit card statements, the hidden receipts, the years of lies all made a different kind of sense. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just cheating. He didn't choose you over me, I said quietly, the realization turning my blood to ice. He chose both of us. But why? Elena's expression shifted suddenly, her eyes widening. Wait, Sarah, before the accident I found something. In Marcus's car. I'd been suspicious for weeks. Little things that didn't add up. Phone calls he'd take in another room. Receipts from restaurants he said were client dinners. But the amounts were wrong. Too expensive for business, too intimate for anything professional. What did you find? I leaned forward, my accountant's instincts prickling. A folder. Hidden under his driver's seat. I only found it because I dropped my earring and was reaching under to get it. She turned carefully in the bed, wincing with pain, and pointed to the small rolling table beside her. It's in there. In the drawer. I grabbed it before I got out of the car that night. I was going to confront him about it, but then she gestured weakly at it herself. At the bandages and monitors and evidence of the crash. My hands trembled as I pulled open the drawer. Inside was a manila folder, worn at the edges, stuffed thick with papers. I pulled it out and opened it on my lap. Bank statements. Dozens of them. Accounts I'd never seen before, with routing numbers and bank names I didn't recognize. But there, At the top of each statement were names I did recognize. Sarah Morrison. Elena Harrington. Oh my God, I whispered, flipping through page after page. These are accounts in our names. Both of our names. But I never opened these accounts. Neither did I, Elena said, her voice tight with fear. Keep looking. There's more. There was more. So much more. I spread the papers across the foot of her hospital bed, my accounting training kicking in automatically, organizing and categorizing even as my hands shook. Property deeds, investment statements, loan documents. And there, at the bottom of every single one, were signatures. My signature. Elena's signature. These aren't real, I said, holding up a property deed to the light. This signature, it looks like mine, but look at the capital M in Morrison. I always loop it twice. This only loops once. It's forged. Elena took another document from the pile, studying it. Mine too. The way I sign my E, the tail always extends below the line. This doesn't. He copied our signatures, but not perfectly. I started doing the math, adding numbers in my head, my accountant's brain cutting through the emotional chaos to focus on cold, hard figures. Elena, this account here, it shows a balance of $42,000 6 months ago. The current balance is zero. This one too, Elena said, pointing to another statement. 38,000. Withdrawn in increments over 4 months. We went through them one by one. Savings accounts drained. Certificates of deposit cashed early. A property I'd inherited from my grandmother sold 18 months ago without my knowledge. The proceeds deposited into an account I'd never opened, then transferred out in weekly withdrawals. An investment portfolio Elena had built from her bonuses liquidated completely, gone. How much? Elena's voice was barely audible. Total. How much? I didn't want to tell her, didn't want to say the number out loud because saying it would make it real. But I'd added it up twice now, and both times I got the same figure. $412,000, I said. That I can see here. But Elena, if he's been doing this systematically, if these are just the documents you happen to find, there could be more. Other accounts. Other assets. Over 2 years, Elena said, picking up one of the oldest statements. He's been doing this for at least 2 years. Slowly, carefully. Small enough amounts that we wouldn't notice. And I hadn't noticed. That was the part that made me feel sick. I was a senior accountant, a partner at my firm. I audited million-dollar companies for a living. But I'd never audited my own life. I'd trusted Marcus with our finances, let him handle the investments and property management while I focused on my clients. He'd always said he wanted to take that burden off my shoulders. Now I understood why. Look at this, I said, pulling out another document. This is a transfer authorization. It's moving money from this account. I traced the paper trail to this one and this one. He's been funneling everything into a single account. Under what name? Elena asked. I flipped to the final page, the destination account where all the money had ultimately been transferred. The name on the account made my blood run cold. Marcus Reynolds. Reynolds? Elena repeated. That's not Harrington or Morrison. That's a third name. A third identity. I stared at the statement, at the account balance that showed $389,450.22 as of last month. Nearly $400,000. Our money, our assets, everything he'd stolen from both of us, consolidated under a name neither of us had ever heard him use. My mind was racing now, seeing patterns, connecting dots the way I did when I audited companies and found discrepancies. Elena, this is systematic. This is planned. He's been positioning himself to take everything. He married me, got access to my assets. He got engaged to you, got access to yours. He's been slowly liquidating everything we own and moving it into an account only he controls. But why? Elena looked lost, overwhelmed. If he wanted money, he could have just asked. I would have helped him if he was in trouble. We could have. No. I cut her off. You don't do this if you want help. You don't forge signatures and create false accounts and steal from 2 women over years if you're just in financial trouble. This is deliberate. This is I stopped, a horrible thought occurring to me. This is preparation. Preparation for what? I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the bandages covering her arms, at the bruises on her face, at the monitors tracking her vital signs after a car accident that had nearly killed her. Elena, I said slowly, my voice shaking. Has Marcus talked to you about life insurance? Her face went white. Yes, she whispered. 3 months ago. He said we should both have policies since we were getting married. He said it was the responsible thing to do. He helped me fill out all the paperwork, made it so easy. I thought he was just being practical. The folder slipped from my numb fingers. How much is the policy for? $2 million. The room seemed to tilt. Elena. Who's the beneficiary? Marcus is. Her voice was barely audible now. Marcus Harrington. That's what I put on the forms. He's listed as my fiancé. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. With shaking hands, I pulled out my own phone and opened my email, searching for the insurance company we used. It took me 3 tries to type my password correctly. There it was. My life insurance policy. Updated last year when Marcus said we should increase our coverage since we were getting older, since my firm was doing so well and we had more assets to protect. I'd been so busy with a major client acquisition that I'd barely glanced at the paperwork before signing. Policy amount, $2.5 million. Beneficiary, Marcus Morrison. He has life insurance policies on both of us. I said, the words coming out flat, emotionless, because if I let myself feel anything right now, I would shatter completely. Worth a combined total of $4.5 million. And he's systematically drained $400,000 from our assets and hidden it under a false name. Elena was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Sarah, my accident, the one that put me here. The police said my brake lines might have been tampered with. What do you mean, tampered with? The words came out sharp, urgent. Elena, what exactly did the police say? Before she could answer, the door swung open. A nurse walked in, young and cheerful, holding a tablet. Time for vitals check, Miss Harrington. How are you feeling this afternoon? Fine, Elena said automatically, though her face was pale and tear-streaked. The nurse began checking the monitors, adjusting the IV line, taking Elena's blood pressure with practiced efficiency. Your husband has been calling every hour on the hour, she said with a warm smile. Such a devoted man. Most spouses call once a day, maybe twice. But Mr. Harrington? Like clockwork. Every single hour. I felt sick. Marcus was checking in, making sure Elena was still alive, monitoring her condition. He mentioned something when he called this morning. The nurse continued, wrapping up the blood pressure cuff. Said something about needing to update your life insurance policy? He wanted to know when you'd be well enough to sign some papers. I told him you'd need at least another week before you should be handling any paperwork. The concussion, you know. We need to make sure you're thinking clearly. Elena's eyes met mine across the bed. I never said anything about updating my policy. The nurse looked between us, finally noticing the tension in the room. Oh, well, maybe I misunderstood. He seemed quite concerned about it, though. Said it was time-sensitive. She finished her notes on the tablet. I'll be back in a few hours. Press the call button if you need anything. She left. And the silence she left behind was deafening. He's trying to increase the policy, I said. Elena, he already has $2 million on you. If he's trying to update it, he wants more. Elena's voice was hollow. How much is enough? How much am I worth dead? I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the doorway. The hospital corridor stretched in both directions, fluorescent lights humming overhead, completely normal. Completely oblivious to the nightmare unfolding in room 427. I pulled out my phone and dialed my insurance agent, David Chen. I'd worked with him for 15 years. He'd helped me set up my first policy when I was 28 years old. Sarah Morrison, he answered warmly. It's been a while. What can I do for you? David, I need to ask you about my life insurance policy, the one with your company. Of course. Let me pull up your file. I heard typing. Okay, here we are. Policy number ending in 4,472. $2.5 million in coverage. Everything's current. Premiums are paid up. Is there a problem? When was it last updated? Let's see. Looks like the coverage amount was increased from $1 million to $2.5 million last August. About 14 months ago. August. Right after our vow renewal. Right after Marcus had taken me to that expensive restaurant and told me how much he loved me, how he wanted to make sure I was protected if anything happened to him. He'd said it was because of his new position at work, the increased salary, the larger assets we needed to protect. I'd signed the papers without question. David, who initiated that increase? Your husband did. Marcus Morrison. He called in August of last year, said you'd both been discussing increasing your coverage. He had you come in to sign the paperwork. You were there, Sarah. You signed it yourself. Right. Of course. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. And the beneficiary? Marcus Morrison, your husband. Just like always. Have there been any other changes? Any recent calls about the policy? A pause. Actually, yes. Marcus called 3 weeks ago. Asked about increasing the coverage again. To $3.5 million. I told him you'd need to come in to sign off on that. We've been trying to schedule an appointment, but you haven't returned our calls. 3 weeks ago. The same time Elena's policy had been taken out for $2 million. I never got those calls, I said. We've been calling the number on file. Let me check. More typing. We've been calling 555 to 0147. Is that still your number? No. That's not my number. That's never been my number. My heart was racing. David, has anyone tried to change beneficiaries recently? On my policy, or do you handle Marcus's policy too? I do, yes, and no beneficiary changes. But Sarah, I have to tell you, there's something odd. 3 weeks ago, Marcus also inquired about taking out a policy on Elena Harrington. Said she was his fiancée. I told him he'd need her signature, her medical records, all the standard documentation. He provided everything. The policy was approved and activated 2 weeks ago. $2 million in coverage, with him as sole beneficiary. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. 2 weeks ago? Yes. Why? Sarah? Is something wrong? 2 weeks ago. And Elena's accident had happened 3 days ago. Just 12 days after a $2 million policy on her life had been activated. David, I need you to flag my account. And Elena Harrington's account. Mark them as potentially fraudulent. No changes, without in-person. Verification from both me and Elena, with photo ID. Can you do that? Sarah, what's going on? Can you do that? I repeated. My voice hard. Yes. Yes, of course. I'll put a hold on both accounts right now, but Sarah, if there's fraud involved, you need to contact the police. I will. Thank you, David. I hung up and stood there in the hallway, my mind racing, doing the math I was trained to do. $2.5 million on me. $2 million on Elena. Another $400,000 stolen from our accounts and hidden under a false name. Marcus had been positioning himself for a $4.9 million payday. All he had to do was kill us both. And he'd already tried once. I walked back into the room. Elena was watching me, her eyes wide and frightened. She knew. She could see it on my face. I sat down in the chair beside her bed, took her hand in mine. Elena, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. I need you to tell me exactly what happened with your car accident. Everything you remember. Every detail. Elena took a shaky breath, her hand gripping mine tighter. It was Tuesday night. 3 days ago. I was driving home from work, taking Morrison Hill Road like I always do. It's the quickest route from my office to the apartment. What time? I asked. Around 8:30. It was dark. The road was empty, it usually is at that hour. Most people take the highway. She closed her eyes, and I could see her forcing herself to remember. I was thinking about Marcus, about confronting him about the folder I'd found. I'd been planning what to say, rehearsing it in my head. Did he know you'd found it? I don't think so. I'd put it back under the seat after I looked through it the first time. I was scared, Sarah. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew it was bad. I knew something was very wrong. A tear slipped down her cheek. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have just left. You couldn't have known, I said quietly, though the words felt hollow. Because she should have known. We both should have known. All those little warning signs we'd ignored. All those inconsistencies we'd explained away. The hill, Elena continued, her voice growing tighter. Morrison Hill is steep. There's that long descent with the curves, and then at the bottom, there's that sharp turn before the guardrail. I've driven it 1,000 times. I always brake going down, keep my speed under control. I knew the road. I'd driven it myself countless times. It was notorious for accidents steep enough and winding enough that the city had posted warning signs every 100 yards. Speed limit 35, sharp curves ahead, brake before curve, not in curve. I pressed the brake pedal, Elena said, and her voice broke. About halfway down the hill, where I always do. And nothing happened. The pedal it went straight to the floor. No resistance. Nothing. My stomach dropped. Nothing at all? Nothing. I pressed harder, pumped it like you're supposed to do if your brakes fail, but it was like pressing on air, and I was picking up speed. The car was going faster and faster, and the curve was coming up, and She was breathing hard now, the monitor beside her bed beeping faster. I tried the emergency brake. I yanked it as hard as I could, but it didn't do anything either. I was going 50, 60 miles an hour down that hill, and I couldn't stop. I could picture it, the darkness, the steep descent, the growing panic as the brake pedal refused to respond, the certainty of what was coming. I tried to gear down, Elena continued. Shifted into a lower gear, but it was too late. I was going too fast. The curve came up, and I tried to turn, but at that speed, she shook her head. I went straight through the guardrail. The car flipped. I remember the sound of metal tearing, glass shattering, and then I remember waking up here. The police report, I said, already pulling out my phone. You said they mentioned tampering. I pulled up the browser, searched for the accident report. It took me a few minutes to find it. Public records. Filed 3 days ago. Traffic collision, single vehicle, Morrison Hill Road, 8:47 p.m. And there, in the investigating officer's notes, vehicle brake system failure, driver reports complete loss of braking function, vehicle impounded for mechanical inspection. Preliminary examination suggests possible brake line tampering. Brake fluid reservoir empty, fluid trail visible along undercarriage. Case status, ongoing investigation. I read it aloud to Elena and watched her face go gray. Brake line tampering, she whispered. Someone cut my brake lines. Not cut, I said. My accounting brain analyzing the details. Drained. Or punctured in a way that would drain slowly. If they'd been cut completely, you wouldn't have made it out of your parking lot. But if they were damaged just enough to leak slowly, the brake fluid would drain gradually. By the time you needed to brake going down that hill, there'd be nothing left. That's very specific knowledge, Elena said quietly. And that's when it hit me. The final piece that made everything else make horrible, perfect sense. Marcus is an automotive engineer, I said, the words tasting like poison. He's been one for 23 years. He specializes in brake system design. He worked for one of the major manufacturers for 15 years before he went into consulting. He knows everything about how brake systems work, how they fail, how to make them fail. Elena stared at me. He would know exactly how to make it look like an accident. Not just look like an accident. He'd know how to make it untraceable. How to cause just enough damage that it wouldn't be obvious. How to make sure it happened at exactly the right time and place. I was thinking out loud now, seeing the pattern. Morrison Hill Road. He knew you'd drive down it. He knew you'd need your brakes on that descent. He knew that at 50, 60 miles an hour, you wouldn't make that curve. He knew you'd go through the guardrail. He tried to kill me. Elena said it like she was testing the words, seeing if they'd become more believable if spoken aloud. They didn't. I pulled up the timeline in my head, laying out the facts the way I would for an audit. The insurance policy on you was activated 2 weeks ago. That's 14 days. Your accident happened 3 days ago. That's 11 days for Marcus to plan everything. To access your car, tamper with the brake lines in a way that wouldn't be immediately obvious, and wait for you to drive down that hill. But the folder, Elena said. I found the folder in his car the same night, before the accident. Was he going to? Did he know I'd found it? Maybe. Or maybe it was just time. Maybe he'd gotten everything in place, the policy, the money hidden under a false name, the plan, and he was ready to move forward. I looked at her, at the bandages and bruises, at the machines keeping her alive. Elena, you survived. That wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to die on that hill. And then what? Her voice was barely audible. After I was dead, and he collected the $2 million on me, then what? The answer sat between us, unspoken but understood. After Elena, there would have been another accident, another brake failure maybe, or a fall, or a fire. Something that would look tragic and coincidental. Something that would get him another $2.5 million. Something that would make him a very wealthy widower. Elena's eyes locked on mine, and I saw the question forming before she asked it. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. Sarah, do you think I'm the only one he's tried this with? The question hung in the air between us, poisonous and heavy. I looked at Elena, my mirror image, my lost sister, my husband's other wife, and felt the walls of my understanding crumble completely. I don't know, I said quietly. But I need to find out. While Elena closed her eyes to rest, exhaustion finally overtaking her, I turned my attention back to the scattered papers still spread across the foot of her hospital bed. The bank statements. The forged signatures. The evidence of a man who'd spent years building elaborate lies. I sorted through them methodically, the way I'd been trained to analyze financial documents, looking for patterns, for inconsistencies, for threads I could pull. Most of it I'd already seen: the accounts in our names, the systematic theft, the consolidation of funds under the name Marcus Reynolds. But then I found something I'd missed before. Tucked between 2 bank statements was a different kind of form, insurance beneficiary designation, not for Elena's policy or mine, for a third policy I'd never seen before. Policyholder, Marcus Reynolds. Coverage amount, $1.5 million. Beneficiary, Jennifer Reynolds. My blood ran cold. Reynolds. Not Morrison. Not Harrington. Reynolds. And there, at the bottom of the form, written in pencil as though it had been jotted down quickly, was a phone number and an address. Portland, Oregon. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. This wasn't possible. 2 wives wasn't enough. But even as I thought it, I knew. Of course it was possible. If he could lie to me for 26 years, if he could juggle 2 identical women who didn't know each other existed, if he could systematically steal and plan murder, of course he could have more. I looked over at Elena. She'd fallen asleep, her breathing deep, and even despite everything, the monitor beeped steadily. She looked so much like me lying there. We'd lost 30 years. We'd found each other in the worst possible way. And now I was about to discover if the nightmare went even deeper. I stepped out into the hallway, walked to a quiet corner near a window overlooking the parking lot, and dialed the number. It rang 3 times. 4. I almost hung up. And then, Reynolds' residence. A woman's voice, bright and cheerful. Young. Maybe early 30s. My throat closed up. I forced words out. Hi. Is Marcus home? Oh no, he's traveling for work this week. He'll be back Friday. Can I take a message? Traveling for work. The same lie he'd told both Elena and me 1,000 times. I'm an old friend, I managed. From college. I was in town, and thought I'd look him up. What's your name? I'm Jennifer Reynolds. I'm his wife. She said it with pride, with warmth. The way I used to say I was Marcus's wife. The way Elena had probably said she was his fiancée. The parking lot blurred. I gripped the window ledge to steady myself. His wife. How long have you been married? 5 years last month. Time flies, doesn't it? She laughed. A pleasant sound completely at odds with the horror spreading through my chest. Are you in Portland? Maybe we could meet for coffee before Marcus gets back. He'd be so surprised. 5 years. Not 3 like Elena. Not 26 like me. 5 years of another marriage, another life, another woman who had no idea what she'd gotten into. Jennifer, I said carefully, I need to ask you something. Has Marcus talked to you about life insurance? Oh yes, he's very thorough about that kind of thing. We both have policies. He set them up when we first got married. Said it was the responsible thing to do, especially since we were talking about starting a family. Her voice softened. He's so good about planning for the future, making sure we're protected. Some men don't think about those things, but Marcus is different. Protected. The word made me want to scream. How much is your policy for? I asked. Let's see. I think mine is for $1.5 million, and his is the same. We figured that was enough to cover the mortgage and everything if something happened to one of us. A pause. Is everything okay? You sound upset. How did I tell her? How did I explain to a stranger that her husband of 5 years was a predator? That she was one of at least 3 wives? That he'd already tried to murder someone? That she might be next? Jennifer, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My name is Sarah Morrison. I've been married to Marcus for 26 years. Silence. Then, that's not funny. I'm not joking. I'm sitting in a hospital in California right now with Elena Harrington, who Marcus has been engaged to for 6 months. She's here because someone tampered with her brake lines. Someone who knew exactly how to make it look like an accident. No. Her voice had gone hard. No. You're insane. Marcus, wouldn't this is some kind of scam? I'm hanging up. Wait. I said desperately. Jennifer, please. Check your beneficiary designation. The one for your life insurance policy. Marcus has a policy with you listed as beneficiary, doesn't he? A policy on his own life? Yes, but that's not unusual. But I bet if you look closer, you'll find other accounts, other policies, things he's set up in your name that you never authorized. Check your credit report. Check for properties or investments you don't remember signing for. And Jennifer, check your car. Check your brake lines. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. Who are you? I'm his first wife, I said. And I think you might not be his last. Jennifer, he's an automotive engineer. He knows how to make brake failures look like accidents. Elena almost died 3 days ago. Her brake lines were cut. She has a $2 million life insurance policy with Marcus as the beneficiary. This is insane, Jennifer whispered. But there was doubt in her voice now. Fear. This can't be real. I'm going to text you photos, I said. My marriage license. Photos of Marcus and me. Bank statements showing accounts in my name that I never opened. And Jennifer, I need you to be honest with me. Has anything felt off lately? Has Marcus been asking about your insurance? Suggesting updates or changes? A long pause. Then, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. 3 weeks ago. He said we should increase my coverage. Because of the new job I just got. The raise. He said we should update the policy to reflect my new income. The same timeline. The same pattern. Jennifer. I said, my voice breaking. I think you're in danger. I think we all are. And I think we need to stop him before someone actually dies. I heard her breathing on the other end of the line, rapid and shallow. Processing, deciding whether to believe the impossible. I need proof, she finally said. Send me everything. Photos, documents, everything. And then, her voice hardened. And then, I'm checking my car. And calling the police. Check your car first, I urged. Don't let him know you suspect anything. Just check. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I hung up and walked back to Elena's room. She was awake now, watching me from the bed, her eyes full of questions. There's a third wife, I said. In Portland. Jennifer Reynolds. Married 5 years. And he's trying to increase her life insurance policy too. Elena closed her eyes. How many, Sarah? How many of us are there? I don't know. But Jennifer's going to check her car. Check for tampering. And we're going to figure this out together. I moved to Elena's bedside and took her hand. All three of us. Elena opened her eyes and looked at me. Really looked at me. Her twin. Her sister. Her fellow victim. And I saw the moment her fear transformed into something else. Something harder. Something that looked like determination. We have to stop him, she said. Before he kills one of us. I squeezed her hand. We will. We spent the night planning. Elena propped up in her hospital bed, me, in the chair beside her, both of us running on adrenaline and fury. Around midnight, Jennifer called back. I checked my car, she said without preamble, her voice tight. There's brake fluid on my garage floor. A small puddle under the front left tire. Fresh. It wasn't there yesterday. Elena and I looked at each other. He'd already started. Jennifer would have been next. Get out of that house, I told her. Go to a hotel, somewhere he doesn't know about, and don't drive that car. Already packed, Jennifer said. I'm at a Holiday Inn near the airport. And I called the police. They're sending someone to inspect my car tomorrow morning. Good. We need you to do something else. I took a breath. We need you to fly here, to California. Tomorrow if you can. Why? Because we're going to end this, Elena said. Her voice steady despite the exhaustion written across her face. All three of us together. But we need help. We need the FBI. By 2 a.m., we'd made our calls. The FBI, because Marcus had committed fraud and attempted murder across state lines, California and Oregon, at minimum. A local detective, recommended by the officer who'd filed Elena's accident report, who'd been suspicious of the brake tampering from the start. A forensic accountant I knew from my firm, someone I trusted completely, who agreed to analyze all the financial documents Elena had found, and we'd formulated a plan. Jennifer arrived the next morning, taking a red-eye flight from Portland. When she walked into room 427, the three of us fell silent, staring at each other. Jennifer looked nothing like Elena and me. She was shorter, curvier, with auburn hair and green eyes. But the expression on her face was identical. Betrayal, anger, fear, determination. So this is real, Jennifer said quietly, looking between us. You really are twins. We really are, I confirmed. And he really is a monster. Jennifer set down her bag and pulled out her phone. I brought everything. Marriage certificate, insurance policies, bank statements, and photos. Years of photos of Marcus and me. Our wedding, our anniversary trips, all of it. The forensic accountant arrived an hour later. A sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, who took one look at the mountain of evidence and let out a low whistle. This is going to be a prosecutor's dream, she said. I'll have a preliminary report ready by this afternoon. Detective Chen came next, a calm man in his 50s, who listened to our story without interrupting, taking notes, his expression growing darker with each revelation. The brake line tampering was always suspicious, he said. But this is premeditated, attempted murder. Potentially multiple counts. And the financial fraud alone is enough to put him away for decades. We need to catch him in the act, I said. We need him to incriminate himself. We can wire the room, Detective Chen said. Audio and video. FBI's already signed off on it. They're setting up now. He looked at Elena. You think you can call him? Get him to come here? Elena's jaw tightened. Yes. The FBI agents arrived just before noon, 2 of them, professional and efficient, explaining how the recording equipment worked, what they needed from us, how this would go down. They positioned themselves in the hallway, along with Detective Chen and 2 uniformed officers. And then it was time. Elena picked up her phone with shaking hands. I stood on one side of her bed, Jennifer on the other, 3 women bound together by the lies of one man. She dialed. He answered on the second ring. Elena. Thank God. I've been so worried. How are you feeling? His voice. Warm. Concerned. Loving. The same voice that had told me he loved me for 26 years. The same voice that had probably whispered sweet nothings to Jennifer. I wanted to scream. "I'm okay," Elena said, her voice carefully weak. "Marcus, they're discharging me today. Can you come pick me up?" Of course, sweetheart. I'll be right there. 30 minutes. I'm so glad you're coming home." Such relief in his voice. Such believable emotion. "I love you, Elena." "I love you too," Elena said, and hung up. Her hand was shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. "He's coming," Jennifer said unnecessarily. We waited. The room was wired. The agents were positioned. The trap was set. All we needed now was for Marcus to walk through that door. 28 minutes later, he did. He came in carrying flowers, yellow roses, Elena's favorite, and wearing the watch I'd given him for our anniversary. He was smiling, looking every bit the devoted partner coming to take his injured fiancée home. And then he saw us. All three of us. Standing together in a line beside Elena's bed. Sarah. Elena. Jennifer. His three wives. The flowers fell from his hands. "Hello, darling," I said, my voice cold and steady. "We need to talk about your life insurance policies." His face went white, then gray. His eyes darted between us, calculating, searching for an exit, searching for an explanation that could possibly make sense of this. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Sarah, I can explain." "Can you?" Jennifer cut him off, her voice sharp. "Can you explain why you're married to 3 women? Can you explain the $400,000 you've stolen? Can you explain why my brake lines are leaking and Elena's were cut?" "This is insane," Marcus said, backing toward the door. "You're all insane. I don't know what kind of game this is, but it's over, Marcus," Elena said quietly. "We know everything." I watched his face. Watched the moment he realized there was no talking his way out of this. No lie smooth enough, no performance convincing enough. I saw him look at the door behind him, measuring the distance. And then he ran. He bolted for the hallway, desperate, panicked, and ran straight into Detective Chen and 2 FBI agents. "Marcus Morrison," Detective Chen said, pulling out handcuffs. "Also known as Marcus Harrington and Marcus Reynolds. You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, bigamy, and a whole list of other charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you." The handcuffs clicked shut around Marcus's wrists. He struggled briefly, then went still. One of the agents began reading him his rights while the other held up the folder of evidence we'd compiled. 400 pages of proof. Bank statements. Forged signatures. Insurance policies. Police reports. Photographs. Everything we'd needed to end him. I watched Marcus being led away down the hospital corridor, his head down, his shoulders slumped. 26 years of marriage, walking away in handcuffs. I'd imagined feeling triumph in this moment. Satisfaction. Victory. Instead, I just felt tired. And sad. So incredibly sad for all the years we'd lost. For the lie our lives had been. For the women we might have been if we'd never met Marcus Morrison at all. Elena's hand found mine. Jennifer's found Elena's. 3 women who'd been strangers yesterday, bound together now by shared trauma and survival. "It's over," Elena whispered. But we all knew it wasn't. Not really. The trial was still coming. The fallout. The reporters. The judgment from people who'd ask how we hadn't known, hadn't seen the signs, hadn't been smarter. But for now, in this moment, watching Marcus disappear around the corner in handcuffs, it was enough. The trial took 8 months to begin and 3 weeks to conclude. I sat in that courtroom every single day, Elena on one side of me, Jennifer on the other. 3 women who'd been pawns in a predator's game, watching justice finally catch up with him. The prosecution laid it out methodically, piece by piece, building a case so airtight that even Marcus's expensive defense attorney couldn't find cracks. The financial fraud. The forged signatures. The $412,000 he'd stolen from Elena and me, hidden under the name Marcus Reynolds. The 3 insurance policies totaling $6 million, with him as beneficiary on all of them. But it was what they uncovered during the investigation that made the courtroom go silent. Marcus had done this before. 2 other women, different states, 5 years apart. Angela Martinez in Nevada, 8 years ago, died when her car went off. A mountain road. Brake failure, the report had said. Tragic accident. Marcus, going by Marcus Chen at the time, had collected $1.2 million in life insurance. Rebecca Thornton in Arizona, 3 years ago, died in a house fire while Marcus was traveling for work. Faulty wiring. The investigation had concluded. Another tragic accident. Another $1.5 million payout to her grieving husband, Marcus Thornton. The prosecution brought in fire inspectors who'd re-examined the case, automotive engineers who'd reviewed Angela's accident, forensic accountants who'd traced the money. The pattern was undeniable. Marcus would meet a woman, usually someone vulnerable, widowed, divorced, or in our case, estranged from family. He'd romance her, marry her, take out life insurance policies, systematically drain her assets, and then stage an accident. He'd been doing it for at least a decade, maybe longer. The FBI was still investigating, looking for other victims, other identities, other women who might not have been as lucky as Elena and I were. The defendant is a serial predator, the prosecutor said in her closing argument, her voice ringing through the courtroom. He targeted vulnerable women, gained their trust, married them under false pretenses, and then attempted to murder them for financial gain. He succeeded twice. He very nearly succeeded a third time. If not for the courage and intelligence of these 3 women, she gestured to Elena, Jennifer, and me, he would have continued. There would have been more victims, more deaths, more families destroyed. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder. 2 counts of first-degree murder. Fraud. Bigamy. Identity theft. The list went on and on. The judge gave him 35 years without the possibility of parole. He'd be 83 when he got out, if he lived that long. I watched him being led away in handcuffs for the last time, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure, just a hollow emptiness where 26 years of my life used to be. But then Elena squeezed my hand, and Jennifer put her arm around my shoulders, and I realized that maybe that emptiness was exactly what I needed. Space to rebuild, space to heal, space to figure out who Sarah Morrison was when she wasn't Marcus's wife. The financial recovery took months. Patricia, our forensic accountant, worked with the FBI to trace every dollar Marcus had stolen. We recovered $389,000 of the original $412,000, the rest he'd already spent, probably on maintaining his multiple households and identities. We sold the townhouse I'd shared with him, the apartment he'd leased for Elena, the house in Portland where Jennifer had lived. Liquidated his cars, his possessions, everything that could be converted to cash. When it was all divided 3 ways, we each walked away with about $180,000. Not nearly enough to compensate for what we'd lost, the years, the trust, the trauma, but enough to start over. At least he was fair in the end, Elena joked darkly one afternoon as we signed the final paperwork. Equal shares for all his wives, Jennifer snorted. Only time he was ever fair. We'd started meeting for dinner every week. Sometimes at restaurants, sometimes at Elena's new apartment or my new condo, smaller places, fresh starts, spaces that Marcus had never touched. We'd share meals and stories, filling in the gaps of our lives. Elena told me about the foster homes she'd been placed in, the families that had been kind and the ones that hadn't been. I told her about my journey through the system, about the college scholarship that had saved me, about the career I'd built from nothing. Jennifer became part of our circle too, this unexpected sister by trauma who'd flown across the country to stand with 2 strangers against a shared monster. She ended up moving back east, settling in Boston where she had cousins. We video called every Sunday, the 3 of us, checking in, sharing our progress, reminding each other that we'd survived. Weird support group we've got here, Jennifer said one Sunday evening, raising her wine glass to the camera. Wives of a serial bigamist. That's not a club anybody wants to join. But here we are, Elena said, raising her own glass. Here we are, I echoed. But the real miracle, the one bright spot in all the darkness, was Elena, my sister, my twin. 30 years we'd lost because the foster care system had lied to us, told us each other was dead rather than admit they'd permanently separated us. 30 years of birthdays and holidays and ordinary moments we could have shared. We couldn't get those years back, but we could build new ones. We started small. Coffee dates that turned into long walks through the park, shopping trips where we'd laugh at how we reached for the same clothes, the same colors, the same styles despite living separate lives for 3 decades. Slowly, carefully, we began to excavate our shared past, the memories from before the separation, our foster mother's garden, the oak tree we'd fallen from, the songs we'd made up, the secret language only we understood. "Do you remember?" Elena said one afternoon as we sat in my living room, old photo albums spread across the coffee table. "How we used to pretend we were telepathic. We'd concentrate really hard and try to send each other messages," I said, laughing at the memory. "And then one of us would guess what the other was thinking and we'd be so excited. We were probably just guessing." Elena smiled. "But it felt like magic." "It was magic," I said quietly. "Having you. Having a sister. That was the magic." Her hand found mine. "And now we have it again." 6 months after the trial ended, Elena and I drove to the cemetery where we'd each been told the other was buried. We brought flowers, white roses for the graves that had never really been ours, and sunflowers for the future we were building together. We stood side by side, looking at the headstones, with our names on them. Sarah Morrison. Elena Morrison. Born the same day. Died years apart. Lies carved in stone. "We should probably have these removed," Elena said. "Probably," I agreed. "But maybe not yet. Maybe they're a reminder." "Of what?" "That we died," I said. "The people we were the ones who believed the lies, who lived half-lives without each other, they're gone. And we get to decide who we become, now." Elena looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Who do you want to become?" I thought about it. About the years I'd spent being Marcus's wife, building my identity around someone who'd never really existed. About the sister I'd mourned for 30 years, who'd been alive all along. About the future stretching ahead. Uncertain, but mine. "Your sister," I said finally. "That's who I want to be. Everything else we'll figure it out as we go." Elena put her arm around me, and I put mine around her, and we stood there in the cemetery, 2 survivors holding each other up, 2 sisters who'd found each other in the worst possible way but refused to let that be the end of the story. "Trust your instincts," I said softly, thinking of all the red flags I'd ignored, all the warning signs I'd explained away. "That's what I learned from all this. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore it. And never assume you know everything about someone," Elena added. "No matter how long you've known them. But also," I said, squeezing her hand, "don't give up on miracles. Because sometimes, in the middle of the nightmare, you find something precious you thought you'd lost forever." Elena squeezed back. "Sometimes you find your sister." We placed the flowers on the graves, white roses for the past, sunflowers for the future, and turned to walk away. Together. The way we should have been all along. Behind us, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cemetery. Ahead of us, the path led back to the car, back to our lives, back to the future. We were building one day at a time. I didn't know what that future would hold. I didn't know who I'd become now that I was no longer Marcus's wife, no longer the woman I'd been for 26 years, but I knew I wouldn't be alone. And for now, that was enough.